My name is Margaret, and I've lived 74 years believing that kindness would always be repaid with kindness. I was wrong. For most of my life, I worked as a school librarian, earning little but saving every penny I could. I wasn't rich, but I had enough for comfort, enough for peace. And after my husband, George, passed away, I thought my life would slow down. I imagined gardening, reading by the window, visiting my daughter, Catherine, on weekends. She was all I had left. Catherine was a bright child, always the center of my world. When she was young, she'd run home from school with wildflowers in her hands, shouting, "These are for you, Mom." But as she grew older, something changed. She became distant, polite but cold. Her calls turned shorter, her visits rarer. Still, I told myself she was busy. Life is hard. Maybe she'd come around when things got easier. Then one day, she called me crying. "Mom," she said through tears, "I'm in trouble. I lost my job. I have bills. I don't know what to do." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept seeing her as that little girl holding flowers. The next morning, I called her back and said the words that sealed my fate. "Don't worry, darling. I'll help you. I have my pension. It's enough for both of us." She hesitated. "Mom, are you sure?" "Of course. You're my daughter." A week later, we went to the bank together. She was smiling, saying all the right things. "I'll take care of you, Mom. You won't have to worry again." She convinced me to transfer my entire pension into a joint account, just for convenience, she said. The bank officer explained it all, and I signed, feeling proud to be helping my daughter. I even remember the way she squeezed my hand and whispered, "I love you, Mom." That was the last time I saw her. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No calls, no messages. At first, I thought she was busy. Then I went to the bank to withdraw some money, and the teller frowned. "Mrs. Collins," she said gently, "your account, it's empty." Empty. Every cent I'd worked for, gone. I went home in disbelief. I tried calling her, texting her, even visiting her apartment, but she was gone. Her phone disconnected. The landlord said she'd moved out weeks ago. Weeks before she even cried on the phone. That night, I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the empty teacup across from me. I kept whispering to myself, "She'll come back. She has to come back." Days turned into weeks. I sold my jewelry to pay the bills. I started skipping meals to make the groceries last longer. I told the neighbors she was traveling, that she'd call soon. But deep down, I knew. She had taken everything, including the part of me that believed a mother's love could never be betrayed. Then, one evening, as I sat watching the news, the thing I did every night for company, I heard the words that froze my blood. "Local woman arrested for financial fraud, accused of scamming multiple victims, including family members." The reporter showed her photo. It was Catherine, my daughter. For a long moment, I couldn't breathe. The sound of the TV faded, and all I could hear was the thudding of my heart, echoing like footsteps in an empty hallway. There she was, my Catherine, her picture bright and cold on the television screen, her name scrolling across the bottom in white letters. Catherine Collins, 38, charged with multiple counts of financial fraud. My teacup slipped from my hands and shattered on the floor. I didn't even flinch. I just stared. The news anchor kept talking about victims, forged documents, missing funds, but the words blurred together like static. I whispered her name, Catherine. I thought maybe if I said it softly enough, she'd walk in the door and tell me it was all a mistake, that she didn't mean it, that she was still my daughter. But the truth hit harder than I could bear. She wasn't the girl with wildflowers anymore. She was a stranger wearing my daughter's face. The police came the next day. Two officers, polite but distant, knocking on my door as if it were just another case file. "Mrs. Collins," one of them said, "we'd like to ask a few questions about your daughter." I nodded, numb, and invited them in. The younger officer glanced around my small living room, the framed family photos, the worn furniture, the empty teacups, and his expression softened. "Did you know she was under investigation?" he asked gently. I shook my head. My voice came out hollow. "I only found out last night, on TV." They exchanged a look. The older one pulled out a folder. "Your daughter opened several accounts under different names. She used yours as a reference, and we believe she accessed your pension without your consent." "She told me it was for us," I said. My throat tightened. "She said she needed help. She said she loved me." The officer sighed. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We've heard that a lot." When they left, they handed me a card. "In case you remember anything else," they said. But what was left to remember? I had lived every moment of it, every word, every lie, etched into me like scars. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house felt haunted by her absence, or maybe by her betrayal. I wandered from room to room, touching the framed photographs. One of them was of Catherine's 5th birthday. She was wearing a blue ribbon and frosting on her nose. I smiled through tears. "How did we get here?" I whispered to the photo. I tried to remember the signs. The phone calls where she avoided questions, the way she always changed the topic when I mentioned visiting her, the hurried tone in her voice. She had been planning this. All that time, while I was knitting her sweaters, saving her favorite recipes, she was planning to take everything I had left. Weeks passed. The story stayed on the news. Catherine's name appeared in headlines linked with phrases like embezzlement, fraud ring, and elder exploitation. Every time I heard it, my heart cracked a little more. Then, one afternoon, there was another knock on the door. This time, it wasn't the police. It was a woman, mid-30s, dressed simply, her eyes kind but tired. "Mrs. Collins?" she asked. "My name is Rachel. I was also one of Catherine's victims." I let her in, unsure what to say. She sat down, holding a folder of papers. "She took $10,000 from me, said it was for a charity. When I realized it was fake, I went to the police. That's how they caught her." I stared at her, my mind spinning. "So, you're the reason they found out?" Rachel nodded, then hesitated. "I'm sorry. I didn't know she was your daughter. I couldn't stay quiet." I reached for her hand. "Don't be sorry," I whispered. "You did what I couldn't." For the first time in months, I cried, not just for the money or the betrayal, but for the years I spent blind to who my daughter had become. Rachel squeezed my hand. "The police said there'll be a trial. You can come if you want." I didn't answer right away. The thought of facing Catherine again, seeing her behind a glass wall, terrified me. But I also knew I needed to hear it from her own lips. I needed to know why. That night, I looked out the window, the moonlight spilling across the floor. I made myself a promise. I would go to the trial, not as a victim, not as a broken old woman, but as a mother who still needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and cold air, that sterile kind of quiet that swallows every whisper. I had never been inside a courtroom before. I'd only seen them in movies, where justice looked neat and easy. But nothing about that morning felt easy. I sat in the second row, clutching my worn purse, my hands trembling slightly. People filled the benches, reporters, strangers, other victims. I could hear them murmur Catherine's name, repeating the same headlines that had shattered my world. When they brought her in, I almost didn't recognize her. She was thinner, her once glossy hair now dull, tied back hastily. Her wrists were bound in handcuffs that clinked softly as she walked. But it wasn't the sight of her chains that broke me. It was her eyes, blank, tired, hollow. The same eyes that once sparkled when she'd say, "I love you, Mom." She looked up briefly, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, our eyes met. She froze, then quickly looked away. I wanted to scream her name. I wanted to run up there, grab her by the shoulders, and ask, "Why, Catherine? Why did you do this to me?" But the courtroom rules were strict: silence, order, restraint. So I swallowed every word like poison and waited. The prosecutor began listing her crimes: identity theft, bank fraud, exploitation of the elderly. Each charge felt like another stab to my chest. When they read her own mother's pension, a few people in the courtroom gasped. I lowered my head, ashamed, though I wasn't the one who should have been. The judge looked at Catherine. "Do you understand the charges against you, Miss Collins?" Catherine nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "Yes, Your Honor." It was strange, hearing her voice again after so long. Part of me wanted to run to her, hold her like I used to when she cried after scraping her knees. Another part of me wanted to disappear, because the daughter I raised would never be standing there. When the judge asked if there was any family present, I stood up before I could stop myself. "Your Honor," I said, my voice shaking, "I'm her mother." The courtroom fell silent. The judge nodded, looking at me with sympathy. "Would you like to make a statement, Mrs. Collins?" I took a deep breath. My legs felt like stone, but I walked forward. My heart thudded in my ears as I looked at Catherine, my only child, the same girl I once sang lullabies to, now staring down at the floor. I loved my daughter more than anything," I began. "She was all I had left. When she asked for help, I gave her everything, not because I had to, but because I believed in her. I trusted her." I paused, my throat tightening. And she took that trust and turned it into a weapon. She didn't just take my money. She took my peace, my dignity, my faith in people. A murmur rippled through the room. Catherine's shoulders trembled, but she still wouldn't look at me. "And yet," I continued, "I came here today not to seek punishment, but to ask one thing." I stepped closer, my voice breaking. "Why, Catherine? Why did you do this to me?" For the first time, she looked up. Tears glistened in her eyes. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then, finally, she whispered, "Because I thought you'd never forgive me if I told you the truth." The room seemed to blur. "The truth?" I asked, barely able to speak. "What truth?" She closed her eyes. "I was drowning in debt, Mom, not from gambling, not from greed, from helping someone else, a man I thought loved me. He told me he'd kill himself if I didn't pay what he owed." She laughed bitterly, and I was stupid enough to believe him. I felt the world tilt. The air felt too heavy to breathe. "You could have told me," I whispered. "I would have helped you. We could have figured it out together." "I couldn't face you," she sobbed. "You always saw me as your little girl who could do no wrong. I didn't want to be your disappointment." The judge cleared his throat gently, signaling the end of the statement. But the damage, the pain, had already settled between us like glass shards. As they led her away, Catherine turned back, her face wet with tears. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said softly. And though I wanted to say something, anything, my voice was gone. All I could do was watch as the doors closed behind her, the sound echoing like the final note of a song I'd never hear again. That night, I sat alone once more, staring at the glow of my TV. For weeks, I'd imagined seeing my daughter again, maybe angry, maybe cold, but not like that. Not broken, not lost. And as the world outside moved on, I realized something painful but true. Sometimes the worst betrayals don't come from hate, they come from love twisted by desperation. Months passed after the trial. Winter crept in slowly, the kind of cold that sinks deep into your bones, not just from the air, but from loneliness. The world outside went on as if nothing had happened. The neighbors waved politely, the mailman smiled, the seasons changed. But inside my small house, time had stopped. Every tick of the clock reminded me of what I'd lost. Not the money, not the comfort, but the child I once knew. I went about my days in silence, watering the plants, making tea, reading old books to fill the hours. At night, I often found myself staring at Catherine's childhood photos, her graduation picture, her wedding day, the one of her on my lap holding a red balloon. Each photo felt like a ghost, proof that once upon a time there had been love. That somewhere in the wreckage of lies and betrayal, there was still a girl who used to run to me after a nightmare, whispering, "Don't leave me, Mom." One gray morning, a letter arrived. The return address was from the Women's Correctional Facility, Catherine's handwriting unmistakable. For a long time, I just stared at it, my fingers trembling. Then, finally, I opened it. Dear Mom, if you're reading this, it means you didn't tear it up. Thank you for that. I don't know how to ask for forgiveness when I don't deserve it. I see your face in my dreams every night, and I wake up wishing I could go back to that day at the bank, to stop myself, to tell you the truth. You were right. I should have told you everything. I was scared, ashamed, and stupid enough to believe that stealing from you was better than disappointing you. I was wrong. They say I might get parole in a few years. I don't expect you to be there, but if you ever can, please send me one word, just one, forgiven. That would be enough for me to breathe again. I love you, Mom. Always. Catherine. Tears blurred the ink until the words ran together. I sat there for hours, holding that letter, hearing her voice in every line. She had stolen everything from me, my savings, my peace, but not the part of me that still remembered the little girl who once needed her mother. That night, I couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet, the memories too loud. I walked to my writing desk, pulled out a sheet of paper, and began to write. Dear Catherine, you broke me, but you also taught me something no one else could, that even the deepest wounds can heal if there's still love left beneath them. You are my daughter. That will never change. Forgiven. Mom. I folded the note, sealed it, and sent it the next morning. Weeks later, I stood by the window, watching the snow fall softly outside. For the first time in years, the silence felt peaceful. I still didn't know what would happen when Catherine came out. I didn't know if she'd ever change or if the world would ever forgive her like I did. But I knew this. Forgiveness wasn't for her alone. It was for me, to breathe again, to live again. And somewhere beyond those prison walls, I hoped my daughter, the little girl with wildflowers, finally found her way home.